today we're looking at 3 exercises which will transform one type of triad into a different type of triad simply by lowering one note or raising one note. So we're going to be changing C major triads into C minor triads, C major triads into augmented triads, and we'll be changing C minor triads into C diminished triads. Follow the lesson for free and just pick up all the tips from the video. But if you're interested, this is number 97 to number 99 in my book, Exploring the Fretboard, 100 Exercises for Intermediate Guitar, and there's a link for that in the description. In this particular exercise, the reading aspect is not so important. The important thing is that you learn your initial triad and then you alter it in some way to make the other triad. So that means that when you look at these exercises, you can reduce the work by 50%. You just need to know the first triad shape, and then you can turn it into the second triad that we're looking for with just a tiny bit of knowledge. One thing I'll say before we do the exercises is that if you're more on the early intermediate stage, although it is my hope that you'll be able to play through the whole exercise, if you need to, just play one measure at a time, check it off, and then move to the next measure, check it off, and go through the exercise like that, treating it like a series of individual exercises. If at the end of that you can play through the whole exercise in one go, that's great. If you can't, don't worry about it. You can always come back to the book later when you have more experience. Just make sure you've mastered each measure, and you can treat each single measure as an exercise unto itself. Whatever makes it easiest and for you. It might take a little bit longer, but that's okay. You know, you could just do 2 minutes a day on this book and move on with the rest of your practice, making it quite painless. But if you're trying to force your way through the whole exercise, that might be a little bit challenging. So yeah, however you're comfortable going about these exercises, I think that's great. Just your aim is to just be able to do it. So number 97, we'll be taking C major triads and then turning them into C minor triads. So what we need to do is we take a C major triad, C, E, and G. To make it minor, we lower the third of the chord, which in this case is the E, and we turn it to E flat. So instead of C, E, G for major, we turn it to C, E flat, G, making it minor. So the initial difficulty for students will just be locating the triad. But I think that if you've been following the book, you'll know some of the shapes already, and you'll be somewhat familiar with the exercise. But if you have a lot of trouble with this exercise, you can learn it one measure at a time, or maybe a great thing to do first would just be to locate all the bass notes. You know, you look at the note and you look at the string number. That would also be a great exercise to start with, is just locating those bass notes, because then you're just building triads from those shapes. However you go about learning this, it's going to be great. It's not going to be easy. For the final exercises in the book, I am not babying you much. I'm making you work. So if it takes you a couple days, fine. If it takes you a couple weeks, fine. If it takes you a couple months, fine. However long it takes you, and however you want to work this is just fine. If you want to just learn one measure at a time and then say, I did it, and then move on with the rest of your practice, that's great. The next time you come back to the book, you can do the next 2. And you can slowly work your way through the exercise that way. Whatever makes you comfortable. We've been saying the no names out loud a lot throughout this whole book, but of course with block triads here, it's not as practical. But I think that the idea that you're lowering the E to an E flat will give you quite a bit of awareness of what the note is, because whenever you lower that note, it's the given note that you need to lower. So in this case, E to E flat. So number 97, C major to C minor. Major, minor, major to 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 minor. Just to remind you, it's E to E flat, E to E flat, E to E flat, E to E flat, E, E flat, E to E flat, E to E flat, E to E flat, E to E flat. So the one note that changes each time is the E going to the E flat. In number 98, we're changing from C major triads to C augmented triads. So we're raising the fifth of the chord from G to G sharp. It's the same triad shapes as before, except instead of lowering the third, we're raising the fifth. So again, we're giving you some awareness of what note you're working with. And that's why in this particular exercise, it's not so important to say the note names, because you'll know the note that moves in this case is the G. So major to augmented, major to augmented, major, augmented, major to 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 augmented, just squeeze that first finger up, major to augmented, major to augmented. And again in this exercise, it's G to G sharp, 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 and G to G sharp. Number 99, C minor to diminished. So those minor shapes we learned before, we're turning those to diminished shapes. Now we have to start in a different location because the first position chords don't work because we ran out of notes. So we're starting with the fourth string shape here. So minor to diminished. So when we change from a minor to a diminished, we're taking C, E flat, or in this case G, C, E flat, and we're lowering the fifth of the chord, the G, to a G flat. So we're creating from C, E flat, G to C, E flat, G flat. A little bit more challenging, but it's the last exercise in the book. So when you're done this one, you're essentially done the book. The last exercise is ways to make your own fretboard exercises. So put the work in, you can do it, and then when you're done this one, you'll be done. So number 99. Minor to diminished, minor to diminished, minor to diminished, minor to diminished, we got minor to diminished, minor to diminished, minor to diminished, minor, actually I'll use this fingering, minor to diminished. So again, we're changing the G natural to a G flat. So we're taking our minor shape and we're lowering that G. So we've got a minor, or a G to G flat, G to G flat, G to G flat, G to G flat, and we've got G to G flat, G to G flat, G to G flat, and G to G flat. If you find this particular exercise extremely taxing, just play it one measure at a time. It is my hope that students will be able to go through the whole exercise like I just did, but if you're more on the early intermediate stage, feel free to just play, one measure, check it off once you know it really well. Work on the next measure, check it off. Work on the next measure, check it off. If at the end of that you can play the whole exercise, great. If you can't, that's okay too. Just the act of playing each individual measure can be an individual exercise for you. However you can make it through, you can always come back to the book after you have more experience.